Remember the Vita? Wouldn't be surprised if you didn't. Released in early 2012, the Vita was actually a pretty revolutionary idea for the time. It included not one, but two different touchscreens. There was also a special version of the Vita released called the 3G model, which could get internet anywhere you wanted. Although the biggest revolution it brought was crossplay, being able to play your big budget PS3 and PS4 games on your itty bitty screen so that other people could use the TV. This idea was also later implemented into the Wii U, but the Vita was the one that really brought the idea to us. Right now, Sony's trying really hard to push the Vita because it's almost a necessary attachment to the PS4. Although the system does suffer from some pretty annoying flaws, like the absolutely ridiculously strict policies on memory card swapping and switching PSN accounts, the main thing that held the Vita back was it just didn't have any good games. It's really not more complicated than that. There were only a handful of good games that came out for the Vita the first year it was out. Last year, though, Vita owners were treated to some truly amazing experiences, such as the well-renowned Persona 4 Golden. Believe it or not, 2014 is really looking good for the Vita, and it makes me angry that nobody is talking about it. This year, the Vita is becoming a very worthy purchase for people like me, people into anime-styled RPGs. What I'd like to do with this video is bring some of them to your attention. If you consider yourself an otaku and you have a Vita that's collecting dust, or you haven't purchased one yet, this might be the video to show you that the Vita is something that you should be taking really seriously this year. I never thought I'd be saying this, but the Vita has games now. While the Vita does have some amazing hits from the past 2 years, like the aforementioned Persona 4 Golden, Gravity Rush, and Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward, I really only want to be looking at examples from this year. So, a couple of things before we get started. First of all, legal stuff. I'm not affiliated with Sony Entertainment, and none of the trailers here are owned by me, yada yada yada. Also, all of the games I'm about to talk about are going to be Japanese anime-styled games. If that's not what you're into, then this really isn't the video for you to be watching. I know this sounds obvious, and it sounds kind of stupid for me to say this, but I don't want to come back and see things like, oh, Japanese people are weird. They're all Japanese-style games. That weirdness is what we're after, and some of these games do get pretty weird. So without further ado, these are 12 Vita games you should be looking out for this year if you are an otaku. Why top 12? I don't know. Guess I'm one step ahead of the nostalgia critic. I guess top really isn't the right word, though. We're not going to be talking about the absolute best games. These are just 12 games I came across. So instead of putting them in a top list, we're actually going to talk about them based on their release dates, starting with what came out at the beginning of the year and what's coming out near the end. We good? Let's look at our first game. Danganronpa was a fairly unknown game for the PSP. It was absolutely adored by people who knew what it was and played the game, but it wasn't very well known, so it was considered a niche title. People who played it on the PSP had to wait for some fans, some very dedicated fans nonetheless, to translate the game. But in February 11th, the game saw an official re-release on the Vita. The game is a lot like a Vita and PSP version of the Phoenix Wright series, but it has a way darker tone, more similar to 999 and Virtue's Last Reward. I don't want to give too much about the plot away, even a small summary could give you some spoilers, but the basic idea is you're a high school student, and in order to graduate from your class, you have to kill everybody. I know that sounds rather vague, trust me, it'll make a lot more sense when you play the game for yourself. You decide that instead of killing people, you're going to help figure out who the killers are. The main part of the game are classroom trials, which act a lot like mock trials if you were ever a part of that in high school. If the criminal can commit murder and get away with it without anybody suspecting them during these classroom trials, then he gets to graduate and everybody else is punished. On the flip side, if you can correctly guess who the murderer is, then he gets punished instead of everybody else. If you enjoyed Phoenix Wright but want something with a slightly darker tone, then I think Danganronpa is exactly the series you need to be looking into. A lot of people are going to say that Final Fantasy X was the last good Final Fantasy game. While I personally disagree with this, being somebody who really enjoyed Final Fantasy XIII, the first one, I will admit that Final Fantasy X was the last hardcore Final Fantasy game. While most people normally hate remakes, this was actually a pretty big deal. People were very excited to go back to the Final Fantasy X universe. After playing 12 in the MMOs in the 13 series, I do have to admit, going back and playing one of the more serious games in the series is quite refreshing. So if you're a long-time Final Fantasy fan who hasn't felt that Final Fantasy magic in a while, I think going back and experiencing Final Fantasy X one more time is definitely a good idea. Heck, people were so grateful for this, they're actually admitting that Final Fantasy X-2 was a pretty good game. If you're one of the newer gamers who kind of missed the whole Final Fantasy X thing, then you definitely owe it to yourself if you're an RPG fan to get into what is considered one of the best games in the Final Fantasy series. So whether you're a long-time fan or you've never heard of this before, this is definitely one that you should be adding to your collection. And Final Fantasy X-2 was still not that bad. Moving on. Okay, so picture this with me if you will. Imagine watching the Saw series, but Jigsaw is a bunch of hot anime chicks. And instead of putting people with broken lives in suicidal death traps to teach them a lesson, you're killing everybody. Were you able to imagine that with me? Good, then this is going to be a lot easier to explain. The idea of Deception 4 is you are a bunch of anime chicks and you are laying traps for poor people who wander into your dungeon. The gameplay is surprisingly deep and can get rather complex depending on how much time you're willing to put into it. The traps are all pretty inventive, and watching them trigger off of one another, Home Alone style, is definitely a sight worth seeing. If you're tired of playing the good guy all the time and just need to let your creative juices flow, then pick up Deception 4. It's simply to die for. I really don't know what I'm doing with my life. Ragnarok Odyssey Ace is the update to a game that you've never played. Nobody played Ragnarok Odyssey but me. I was the only one stupid enough to pre-order this game, and I suffered for it. The idea of Ragnarok Odyssey is it's very, very similar to the Monster Hunter series. The main difference is Monster Hunter is kind of slow and methodical. You need to plan out your routes, you need to stalk monsters based on their likes and habitats, and you need to manage your resources and really think out what your game plan is. In Ragnarok Odyssey, it's more of a spectacle fighter. It's very fast-paced and more about speed, timing, and positioning. I don't know if I'm quite comfortable forking out the money to buy this game again. But since you didn't play the first iteration of this game, this might be your chance to experience the Ragnarok Odyssey magic. Hunt monsters, slay bosses, and look good doing it. Conception 2 is actually the game I'm working on at the time of writing this video. If you've played Atlus's Persona 3 or Persona 4, then you're going to be very at home here. Half of the game you're a high school student and the game plays out like a dating sim. When you're done wooing the ladies, you can perform a ritual with them called classmating. Classmating is pretty much the most anime version of sex that you could possibly get and still only keep a mature rating. For those who don't believe me, here's how it works. The male fills the female with his ether energy, which mixes with her star energy. These two energies are then put into a doll called a womb, and from the womb comes a child. And as though all of that weren't obvious enough, most of the cutscenes that take place beforehand are pretty much all innuendos. Every single one of them. Unfortunately for us American dating sim fans, the dating sim elements here aren't quite as deep as we really needed them to be. American otaku just looking for a decent dating sim to get into might want to pass this one up. But if you don't mind trading off the more serious dating sim elements for a pretty fun and addicting battle system, then Conception 2 is the next game you need to add to your Vita collection. If you are a fan of the Atelier Verona series, or pretty much Harvest Moon or Rune Factory, then there's a game coming out you should probably keep an eye on. The game is called Demon Gaze, and it should have some of the same elements, where you're in a town and you can pretty much manage stuff in the town and collect items, so on and so forth, yada yada, you know the deal. You've probably already danced this dance before if you're even looking into this game, but there's something about it that is going to be quite interesting. First of all, the game plays out in first person, which is pretty awesome. It's also a dungeon crawling game, which we haven't really seen very many good dungeon crawling RPGs here in the West in quite a while. Finally, the battle system is supposed to be a revolutionary take on the classic RPG battle system. Admittedly, I haven't looked into it 100%, but I am quite interested to see where they take the RPG system. If the battle system truly is as revolutionary as they make it out to be, then I guess I'll be adding this game to my collection, and I suppose you should as well. Mugen Souls was a game for the PS3 that I passed up. It's adorable, and I do love strategy games, but it looked a little too samey and flat for me. I do think that a handheld system is the perfect medium for this kind of game, though. So when the Vita version comes out here in America, I think I'll be picking it up. Besides, if you're a little bit iffy about getting into another Japanese tactical turn-based game, then take a look at this. You know, I try so hard to defend your weirdness, Japan. So hard. But sometimes, I just don't even know what's going on anymore. So, yeah. I'm going to be picking up Mugen Soul Z for the Vita just to figure out what this gameplay is all about. And if you're curious too, I guess you'll be picking it up with me. Just don't let anybody catch you playing, I guess. Mind Zero is a very stylish, very classic game. Earlier I was talking about a game called Conception 2, which is a lot more like Persona 3 and Persona 4. Mind Zero is much closer to games like Personas 1 and Personas 2 and most of the Shin Megami Tensei series. It looks to be a very dark, very stylized take on classic RPGs. The success of Bravely Default proved the classic RPGs are still something that people are interested in. If you're one of those people who loved the nostalgic feel of Bravely Default and its classic battle system, then I think Mind Zero is something you're going to want to look into. Nothing against the 3DS, but the Vita is capable of much more powerful imagery. If what you're looking for are classic Atlas-like RPG elements with today's graphical standards, then I think Mind Zero is a game that you should definitely get pre-ordered as soon as possible. Come May 27th, I'll be playing it right alongside ya. Hyperdimension Neptunia is a brilliant game series that nobody knows about. Despite the gameplay you're looking at here, it actually got its starts as an RPG. Unfortunately, the RPG elements were really not very good, and the game suffered from a lot of very repetitive, very boring gameplay. People who looked past that, though, found a very engaging and very interesting story with lots of great characters that you can fall in love with. The quickest summary I could possibly give you is it's a parody of the console war where the Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii are all hot chicks. That's pretty much it. The games were filled with so many references and so many in-jokes to gaming that it was just amazing. They're actually planning to release the first two RPGs on the Vita with the enhanced battle system from the newer games. I'm very excited about this, and when this happens, you definitely owe it to yourself as an RPG fan to pick these up. Seriously, the satirical humor of the Neptunia series is absolutely astounding and some of the best I've heard in gaming my entire life. To tide you over, though, in June there's going to be a kind of dancey game that comes out. I'm not really into rhythm games, but I'm probably going to pick this game up anyway just because I'm so in love with the universe. It's not going to be a satirical take on the gaming war with a lot of gaming jokes thrown in, but it could be a fun game to play if you want to get into the universe. If you like rhythm games, pick it up and fall in love with the characters, and when the RPGs come out later this year, then you can get in on those too. I'll be honest, I can't think of a single person that plays BlazBlue for the story, but I know there's some of you weirdos out there. For you freaks of nature, there's a game coming out especially for you. X-Blaze is a game coming out June 24th that'll give you a deeper insight into the BlazBlue lore. It supposedly takes place 15 to 20 years before the events of the first BlazBlue game. I personally don't really know anything about the story in BlazBlue, but if you do know stuff about the story in BlazBlue, then this is going to make a lot more sense to you than it does me. It's a chance to see some of your favorite BlazBlue characters before they ended up the fighting immortals that they are in the BlazBlue series. And if there's any characters you particularly like in this series, it could be fun to see their roots or what their backstories are. It's important to note that this will not be a fighting game. It will actually be a story-based adventure game. So if you want to get X-Blaze because you just need to see what the next step in BlazBlue mechanics are, then you're not going to find anything here. But if you happen to love the characters and want to see a little bit about the backstory of the BlazBlue universe, then get X-Blaze pre-ordered ASAP. Just don't expect many people to know what you're talking about. Fun Kudou fact: I am awful at Disgaea games. I've tried 6 times to get through the first Disgaea game, and it just gets way too hardcore for me. With that in mind, I probably won't be picking this game up. But the flip side to that is I love the Disgaea universe. So I'm hoping by the time August 12th rolls around, I'll be able to change my mind. Disgaea games being remade for handheld systems is definitely nothing new. But to my knowledge, this is the first time that Disgaea 4 has been remade for a handheld system. I said it before and I'll say it again, I think that handheld systems are perfect for tactical RPGs. Whether you're a longtime fan of the Disgaea series, or somebody who has been looking at Disgaea but hasn't really found a good jumping in place yet, this could be your chance. I definitely think you should think about getting into some of the other games first, but if you get started now, you should get a couple of them beaten by the time Disgaea 4 comes out on the Vita, and I think this one looks really good. So dust off your PSP, your PS2, or your DS and get a hand on one of the Disgaea games. This is your chance to get in on the craze before the release of one of the most popular games in the series comes out. And if my gaming schedule calms down a little bit, I'll be right there with you trying to get back into it as always. It's almost a little bit too fitting that this is the game we're leaving off on. How awesome is it that a relatively unknown cult classic like this is getting not one, but two of the games in its series published this year in America? Personally, back when I had a working PSP, I passed this series up when they were translating it, but looking back, I really regret it. I really wish I had become a part of this fan base back when it was super popular. I think with the official release of the games here in America though, the popularity is gonna hit once more. Danganronpa 2 won't be out until this September, so we have plenty of time to go back and beat the first game. I won't make the same mistake of passing this game up twice, and I don't think you should either. If you're watching this video right now and you have a Vita or you're planning on getting a Vita, then there's no excuse for us anymore. We need to get that first game beaten so that when the second game comes out, we can all enjoy it together. The second wave of the Danganronpa popularity is right around the corner, and this time, it starts with us. If you enjoyed my list, then it would really help me out if you left me a like. Has my list convinced you to give the Vita a second shot? Or maybe there's a game you're looking forward to that I didn't include on my list. Whatever you have to say, leave it in the comments section below. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudou news. It's gonna be a good year, gamers. Let's sit back and enjoy.